Good morning, everyone. This session we're going to have a look at clause 4.1, in fact standard 4. We're going to have a look at the types of marketing platforms or information sources that you need to look at as part of that standard, and then a checklist that might assist you in both the development of marketing materials and the review of those marketing materials to ensure your compliance with that standard, with some time for questions at the end. So what does standard 4, or particularly clause 4.1, ask of us? It is, of course, directed at our students, our stakeholders, our clients in terms of the information that we disseminate to those parties. And particularly, I suppose, if we consider the context statement around that standard, we're asked, as we know, the context statement isn't an auditable statement, but it really sets the benchmark for compliance for us. And so if we think about that context statement, it's really saying that the RTO is at all times responsible for the information that it disseminates, that information has to be transparent and accurate for the prospective and current learners. It also requires us to be aware that the information that we disseminate, either from the RTO or the information disseminated by the RTO or on behalf of the RTO, needs to be compliant with this standard. The information needs to be able to allow those prospective learners particularly to make informed decisions about their enrolment or their choices, and therefore it needs to be relevant to the needs of those learners. And so in each RTO that's obviously going to be different in terms of meeting those needs. What does the standard actually say? Well, interestingly, the standard says that accurate and accessible information about an RTO, its services and performance is available to inform prospective and current learners and clients. Now, what I find interesting about this standard is that there's actually nothing in clause 4.1 related to the RTO's performance, but wiser folk than I would be able to help us unravel that mystery. Perhaps it's implied that by providing transparent, accurate information to students, we are obviously then dealing with issues of the RTO's performance. I'm not quite sure about that. I haven't unravelled that mystery myself. So what's new in the standard? Well, if we remember back to AQTF and SNR, we were asked, of course, in that compliance framework, to deal with with marketing and advertising in terms of it being accurate and ethical, as well as consistent with our scope of registration. In this standard and clause, there is only one clause in standard 4.1, and the difference here is that it's not necessarily about marketing and advertising in the, I suppose, in the confines of those two words and their meaning. The standard refers to information dissemination. So anything that the RTO puts out, so we can broaden perhaps our understanding, although that will broadly be marketing and advertising, but any information disseminated by the RTO. And that, of course, also includes information, as we said, that is disseminated on its behalf. And should an RTO have a third-party arrangement, and that third party chooses to subcontract, then the RTO is also responsible for any information disseminated by that subcontractor, okay? If the RTO obviously is responsible for the AQF certification documentation. So we just have to be very careful about and be responsible for the information. So let's have a look then at what the standard particularly says about the services, and I've used the word qualification here, but training products. So qualifications, skill sets, units of competencies, accredited courses that the standard requires us to provide information compliance against. This standard is just a simple standard. It's a prescription, it's a specification, and it's one of the easiest and simplest standards to be compliant with. If you follow the specification in developing and reviewing your materials, then you really have very, very few places to stray from the path. So if we look then at what's required in terms of the standard, it asks you to accurately represent the services that you provide. And that's about those training products that you have on scope. And it's also about making sure that if you do advertise or market any non-current training products, that you only advertise them while they are currently on your scope, recognising that for the majority of you, you will have not opted out of ASQA's service to automatically remove from scope non-current training products. That when you are disseminating information, or if you choose marketing and advertising, that you will always choose or will comply with the requirement to have your RTO code listed on that material, as it is on training.gov.au. If you are going to refer or include a third party, be that a person or another organisation, in any of your material, that you'll do so only with their prior consent. That if you choose to use the NRT logo, you will do so only in accordance with its conditions of use, as is specified in Schedule 4. Now you will realise and you know that there are a number of schedules attached to the legislative instrument, attached to the standards. It's much easier for the standards, for the schedules to be changed, should they need to be changed, than it is to change a legislative instrument. I'm sure that we'll all be given ample notice if any of those schedules ever change, but the NRT logo's conditions of use are in one such schedule, Schedule 4. You have to make clear in your information if there is a third party involved in any of the services that you are going to provide. So in terms of, this might be recruiting of prospective students or learners. It might be distinguishing if there is the delivery of training and assessment on your behalf, or that you are the party that is delivering on behalf of an RTO. So whatever that arrangement might be, the parties must make clear that there is a third party arrangement involved. To clearly distinguish between nationally recognised training and other non-accredited or non-recognised training. To use the full codes and titles, the nomenclature of our sector. And I know some RTOs say to me, oh, you know, people don't understand. But I think it's part of our role to help our clients, help our learners, help our employers understand, and not just put down Certificate 3 in agriculture, because there's been a Certificate 3 in agriculture since 1995. And you know, truly we do want our clients, our employers, our learners to understand that it's worthwhile having the current Certificate 3 in agriculture and not one that, you know, is past. It's also important under the protection of titles that the AQF gives us to understand that, you know, there is something of value in the Certificate 3 in agriculture and not the, you know, something else that might be awarded from an organisation outside of the vet sector or from a non-accredited provider. If you're going to offer something that leads to a licensed or a regulated outcome in a jurisdiction or in multiple jurisdictions, ensure that before you advertise it, before you issue information about it, that you have checked that that outcome is able to be verified with that licensing or regulated body. So don't advertise something unless you are absolutely assured that you have made obviously accurate and factual information about it. And if there are any vet fee help, government subsidised funding arrangements, or any other type of funding support attached to the training product that you are providing information about, make sure that that is also included in the information. Now, I suppose it's all relative, isn't it? Particularly in that last point. If you have a 30-second radio ad, you can't go into the full details of vet fee help in the 30-second radio ad. But you might very well say, you know, this, whatever it is, qualification by name and code, is able to be, or is, approved under vet fee help. You know, there might be just some very small tagline that you're able to alert potential prospective learners to. Of course, then the fuller information would be in perhaps a student handbook or a brochure or other types of information. But it's about how you might reference those things. This standard also tells us what we perhaps, shouldn't do. And I say perhaps because, again, it's going to be contextually appropriate to your RTO. If you can make a guarantee, because in your RTO you can keep that guarantee, or you actually can make a guarantee about something, then fine. But don't make guarantees that you can't meet. So in terms of the language that we use, sometimes we have been, or I have seen, language used that might just be a little close to the line. And certainly we've all perhaps seen language used in advertisements, in marketing, that has certainly crossed the line. So this particular part of the specification of the standard simply says, don't guarantee if you can't make the guarantee. And there are certainly some that, we need to be aware of. So don't make a guarantee, for example, that students can successfully complete. Even in a competency-based system, where we might not yet be competent, we don't want to have phrases like everyone passes or no one fails. As much as you might like to set your students up for success, we can't guarantee success. Don't assume that all students will be able to get a job or employment, unless you as the RTO can guarantee that. So an enterprise RTO, existing workers, yes, perhaps that is the case. A group training organisation that has its own RTO, perhaps that is the case. If you can meet that guarantee, yes, you may very well be able to provide that level of information. But even phrases like qualification, gaining this qualification, or this qualification may enable you or entitle you to employment in. I've seen that recently. Will enable you to gain qualification, gain employment in. I'm not quite sure whether that's just really getting towards the edge. It may enable you to seek qualification in. If it's in a regulated or licensed industry, okay, well, yep, maybe. But I just think perhaps we need to be just a little more careful about our language. So have a look at the way you present, particularly in some of those pathway statements. Just have a look at the way you use that language and just see whether you're perhaps implying a guarantee. As well, we can't guarantee anything that would be contrary to standard 1.1 and 1.2. Now this sits around the training package requirements, sits around amount of training and volume of learning. So, providing exceptionally short courses, providing courses which would not meet the requirements of the training package or the accredited course itself. And this is obviously perhaps a reaction really to some of the strategic review work that ASQA did last year or the year before. So let's have a think about the types of information that you in your RTO use on a regular basis. So you have a number of sources of information that you would regularly disseminate to learners, prospective learners and current learners about training and assessment services. I'm just going to ask you to jot down for your RTO, what would those information sources be or marketing platforms be? Could you jot down for me, what's the information sources or marketing platforms you use in your RTO? I'd just be interested to know, firstly, the types, and then we're going to just try and total up the number. And for those of you online, once you've come to a number, you might like to use the chat window so that Kerry and Suzanne, or Kerry particularly, can get a feel for the number on your list. The number on your list. So think about all of those information sources that would go in the more public sense to your learners, prospective and current. Give you another minute and a half to think about them. I can't wait for the day that this technology becomes like Gogglebox and I can see you out there too. I'll be watching you. Every move you make, every step you take.
We've got lots of responses coming through now, Carol.
Yes.
And we've got, some people are saying 15 or 16 different formats.
Yes.
4, 10, 10 plus, 16. People are writing in websites, social media, information sessions, brochures, Google, magazines, campaigns, newspaper advertisements, lots of word of mouth, flyers, e-learning portal.
So that number range seemed to sit around about 10, did it? 10 to a 15?
Yeah, or maybe some are a bit lower. Some have put 4 or 5.
Yes.
4, 5, 6, but up to 15 or 16.
Okay. And in the room here, just quickly, well, your total. Have a quick.
Probably
8 to 10? 10. 10?
4.
4? 10? 10? 10? 4?
About a dozen.
Yeah, about a dozen. Okay. Thinking around the clients that I had, I went with, on average, and it is a continuum. It is a continuum because it's very, again, contextualised to your business, as all of these things are. Because if you have a very niche business, it could very easily be, 4 or 5. I thought perhaps probably, the average RTO, 8 to 10. And then those that are perhaps larger, bigger budgets, bigger, economies of scale, or perhaps those that are more active in the social media context would be up around the 15 plus, or those that are into media. on the 15 side. Now, I haven't included everything there. Certainly haven't included even newspapers, for example. Google isn't there, for example, but some of the other social media types are. And many of the things I'm assuming that you might have on your list perhaps are there. You might be surprised to see, for example, training and assessment strategies there. Now, since when do we disseminate those to our prospective learners? But some folk actually use their training and assessment strategies as the basis of a cut and paste to clients and learners. So, that's a bit of a tricky one, I suppose. You see operational procedures there. Gee, since when do they go out to learners? But of course, if you're in the Cricos world, of course they do, don't they? They have to be, a number of your operational procedures actually have to be public in terms of the Cricos world. So, very much a contextualised sort of, space for your RTO. But you might see a number of your list sitting there on the board as we speak. In all cases, we have 3 features that we've really got to monitor our platforms or our information sources for, no matter where we go, no matter what space we're in. Every one of these, so whether we've got it simple with 4, whether we've got it more complex with 16 or 18, we have to make sure that all of them are accurate, all of them are factual, all of them are consistent with our scope of registration. So sometimes simple is good, sometimes complex becomes the word when we have a number of different platforms or sources. So this checklist will be provided to you as part of your material pack, and simply, as you could do yourself, it's not a complex task, but to save you reinventing the wheel if you haven't already done so, it provides I'm not quite sure whether I've got a pointer. I won't even try that technology because I may mess something up. It provides a list of all of the features of clause 4.1 under the checklist side of things. And then in terms of the second column, the procedures, if you have procedures, a marketing procedure, for example, which sets out the way in which your materials should be developed, the process that should be gone through, who should be doing the development, how that passes up through your organisation, who should be authorising, signing off, revisions or changes, etc. The second column allows you to double check that that has occurred, either through development and or review. And then the third column is simply a space for you to add your particular collection of information sources, be they the handouts, the flyers, the brochures, the student handbook, or to customise that to everything that you hold in your organisation. And literally then, it's a matter either through development or review, whichever you're doing, because this really needs to be quite systematic in your organisation, to allow you the opportunity to do that from time to time as you see fit, or as you do through internal audit, or as your procedures demand of you to ensure compliance. And you can do this not only for your RTO, but of course you need to do it for third parties as well. So the second page just simply finishes off the checklist with the rest of the requirements, the specification, okay, of the clause 4.1. And we need to open up for questions in the few minutes that remain.
Thanks, Carol. We do have some questions here. First question, do third-party arrangements have to be advertised? Sorry, just way I'm reading this. Do third-party arrangements have to advertise the RTO's logo as well as their RTO code and trading name?
No, not necessarily, but it just has to be clear that there is an arrangement as such. That's correct, yeah. The logo is unnecessary.
Another question, we advertise training courses on our business cards, so actually putting the courses on the business cards. Would I be correct in saying that we need to include the RTO code, sorry, not the RTO code, the course code next to these?
Yes.
Yep. And do we have to put our RTO code on our student workbooks?
Look, I would suggest yes, because I would suggest that, firstly, from a branding perspective and from an IP perspective, you know, there's those benefits as well. But it is information that is going out to students. But I think it's more really about a branding and an IP perspective as well, that you would do that.
Yep.
Yep.
And there's another one here. Do corporate gifts, such as coffee mugs, have to have the RTO code on them?
Oh, no. I think you can save your corporate clients from the RTO code there.
Yeah. Another one, on social media, is it enough to have a reference to a website with all the requirements, or would we need to put this in the actual social media ad?
Sorry, could you just repeat that again?
On social media, so Facebook or Twitter, is it enough to have a reference to the website that has all of the requirements, so the RTO code, NRT logo, all of that, or do we need to put this in the actual social media post?
Look, I might take that on notice, but my gut feeling is that you have the capacity in Facebook, because I'm not a Facebooker, but you have the capacity in Facebook to enter that detail somewhere. But I'd probably just have to have a look at a Facebook account to probably be able to answer that more correctly.
Thanks, Carol. We're
Okay.
up to keep moving on.
Just to finish off, can I just say that, as I said, I think earlier on, this is one of the simplest standards to comply with, but it's also one of the easiest standards for ASQA to breach you on, because the evidence is there in front of them. You know, it's not one that you can easily squirm on, you know, in terms of assessment or something else. You know, there's a bit of squirm room. Here, it is self-evident. You've done it or you haven't done it. You know, it's on the TV advertisement or the newspaper advertisement, or it's not there. So it is so easy for ASQA to get a breach. But it's so simple for you to comply. Yep. Good luck with that one. Okay. Well, I guess without an introduction, I can just flick into something else now. I take my marketing hat off, and I'm guessing I just press a button. Look at that, the wonders of it all. And now we're going to talk about industry engagement. It's just a favourite topic of everybody's, really, isn't it? Okay, what are we going to try and attempt to achieve in this session? We're going to attempt to achieve ways of involving industry in ongoing training and assessment practices, some strategies and activities for industry engagement, and how we actually get to align industry needs to your strategies, resources and practices, and how we might retain evidence of all of that. Again, some time for questions at the end. So what do the standards say? Industry engagement, as we know, has changed significantly. The definition around industry engagement has changed. As part of Standard 1, the broad Standard 1 that as you know, you've probably heard me say, I'm having tattooed on my arm because it's got 27 parts and I can't remember them all. But as part of the broad Standard 1, which talks about RTO's training and assessment strategies and practices being responsive to the needs of industry, among other things, it talks about other things as well. The context statement for this particular standard includes that industry, and I'm just going to read it so I get it right for you, industry must have confidence in the integrity, currency and value of certification documents issued by RTOs through high quality training and assessment and practices that are responsive to industry needs. So, we've known for a very long time that this is an industry-driven agenda. And over 2 iterations previous to this, we have had industry consultation, okay? Industry consultation, then effective industry consultation, and now industry engagement. And the word industry consultation does give the impact or the impression of, well, I'll go out and consult. I'm allowed, I think, to walk this far. I'll go out and consult Stephen. I consulted you, Stephen. How are you? Good. I talked to Stephen. Stephen's okay, and I can put his name on a piece of paper. He said he's okay. He likes me, I like him. All is well with industry. Engagement raises the bar to another level because it actually assumes that there's been more than just a consultation, there's been an engagement, a two-way conversation, more than just a one-off, something that has been perhaps ongoing and participatory, collaborative even. And this particular standard now talks about a range of strategies in that engagement. So, as I said, over a couple of iterations, the bar has been raised. Okay, it's moving us into a new domain. So not only then have we, talked then about this level of engagement and a range of strategies, it now talks about the outcomes of those engagement strategies being used systematically. So not just, well, I did have that bit of a conversation. It was a bit of a two-way. We came to a bit of a collaborative agreement and bingo, okay, there it is there. I can forget about that for another year. Whew. Okay, good-o. Let's move on to something more important now. Okay, industry's done. No, okay, outcomes of a range of strategies being used systematically, okay, to ensure the relevance of not only our training and assessment strategies, our practices and our resources, as well that engagement has had some input into the currency, okay, of our trainers, the current skills of our trainers, assessors, etc. So it's been a conversation about that as well. So that's really quite different. It's also really, it tells us something about the importance of this because it's also been given its own set of clauses. So rather than being tucked away on the end of, say for example the SNRs, tucked away on the end of 15.2 and 15.3, it's actually been given its 2 distinct clauses, 1.5, 1.6. Okay, so this tells us something about how it's been perceived in the realm of things. So, out with the tick and flick, out with the old, in with the new. Now, no one attending today, I'm sure, would have, for a very, very long time, thought that my short exchange here with Stephen was something that, would be typical of RTOs. But, let me say, gone are the days where the training and assessment strategy was taken downstairs to the coffee shop or flicked out on an email to a colleague or a friend or the local XYZ, workshop or, business, and with a pro forma letter or a pro forma tick sheet and said, can you just quickly sign this off, maybe we've got an audit coming up or we just have to do this review. Can you flick it back to us as, quickly as you can? That isn't going to work. So, yes, emails will work in the context of part of a broader conversation, perhaps to confirm a broader conversation. But that process of tick and flicking isn't really going to work. Essentially sitting behind this, industry engagement and the benefits of industry engagement are seen to be, helping industry and RTOs come to, and if we think back to that broad statement I talked about at the beginning, but the benefits of industry engagement are seen to be assisting industry achieve that broader goal of understanding that graduates will be job ready. They'll get a better understanding of the system working, be confident that the system is working in terms of the candidates that they receive, the graduates that they receive. And our employers, if you're in the market of apprentices and trainees, or you have employers that are receiving your vocational placement or work placement students, they will be better able to understand the requirements and the training and or assessment obligations that they have. There are a couple of advantages. So who is industry? For me, anyone that has a stake in the services of your RTO, any entity that has a stake in the services of your RTO. And look, that's a very narrow list. And of course, I know that immediately you're going to look down that list and say, oh, not industry skills councils again. Since when can we engage with industry skills councils? They never talk to us. Give me a moment and we'll talk about how, perhaps. So, your industry is probably very local. For some of you, it might be within 5 or 10 or 15 kilometres of where you actually do your business. For others of you, it could be the state, it could be national. I don't know your business. You know your business, you know where your industry is. You know what your sector is, or your sectors. But likely, okay, it is the little, small, medium or large businesses and firms and enterprises that you deal with. And I'm going to be really quite firm here and say that if you don't deal with them, if you're just churning students through and you don't have a relationship with industry, then now is the time to start. If you're just taking students through the door for dollars and you don't know where they're going, you haven't either got a relationship with employers or industry, you haven't done destination surveys, and you can't tell me who those businesses or industries or firms are because you're just pulling students through the door and sending them out into the ether, then now is the time to start. Yes, there are RTOs that are in a better position, or you might say a more privileged position. Well, that's just the market they're in, if they have apprentices and if they have trainees. That's the market they choose to be in. But everyone now needs to be in the place where they can engage with industry, because that's what the standard says. So if you are not in the place of having corporate clients, if you are not in the place of having apprentices and trainees, then you need to start being in a place where you can actively engage with people in your sector. So if that is by contacting previous students and finding out where they're working and trying to start the network that way, because if they are working in the vocation for which you trained them, that's a damn good start. If you can do some destination surveys and find out where students are going to, hopefully using the qualification for which you've trained them, that's a damn good start. If you can start maybe in, dare I say, some of your industry networks, maybe the suppliers, if you're providing hairdressing in a college. Well, your industry suppliers for all of that hairdressing supplies, that's a good start. And no doubt, you know, many other, I've used obviously hairdressing, but there are many other examples that I could use and you would know about in your sector. You could use employer networks. So there are chambers of commerce, there are local business groups, business leader groups, maybe Lions or Rotary, and they are always looking for guest speakers, and you could start there. You could look at industry organisations, peak bodies. Now, if I use perhaps HIA or master builders in the construction industry, I know that they have RTOs, but they also have local people on the ground in local areas who have interest in training. You could start there if it was construction. Or many other industry organisations have local representatives, and you could start a conversation there. If it was training advisory bodies and skills councils, sure, unless you're perhaps, a national provider, they're not necessarily going to talk to you in terms of industry engagement, but they do have training package specialists. And, sometimes if you're just dealing with the structure of the training package, that's industry engagement. So if you have a conversation with the training package specialist in your industry skills council, and you document that, or you get an email, or you get a response, there's some industry engagement happening there. You may have, again, related, this is very contextually related, but it may be in terms of unions or licensing bodies, specific to particular areas of operation. You may have dealings with representatives there. Again, some of them have training specialists in those particular areas. If your qualification actually doesn't have a clear vocational outcome, so it might be around, for example, second language, adult literacy, then think about, your migrant education centres, community groups. It might be around, some of them might be around, for example, community education. So we're thinking about youth groups, etc. All of those areas are areas of industry engagement. If it's adult tertiary preparation, think about the end user. Who's the end user? Or where is the supply chain? And lock into people in the supply chain. So let's firstly have a look at some of the information you could collect and how that could be useful, because we have to then think about how we're going to actually firstly look at a range of strategies, and then how we're going to systematically use those in terms of our strategies, our practices, and our resources. If we do lock into this supply chain or into our networks, what are the sorts of things we could be asking or gaining from our industry engagement? So we could be getting information about the practical application that these people have for regulations and laws, codes of practice, what the latest equipment is they're using, what procedures they're using, what machinery they're using. So yes, okay, we all know about the electrical safety legislation. We all know that there's some regulations. We all know there's some codes of practice. And, okay, well, we're teaching our, electricians, system electricians, that sort of stuff. But, when the contractor is actually applying that in practice, and they're getting the regular updates from the electrical safety office, and they're getting all of the information on recalls and other sorts of things, maybe seeing that in practice and how they actually do that in terms of their job, in terms of certification, okay, having that practical application gives you some really good anecdotal information to colour the training and assessment process. So, it is about, how we can get practical application sometimes. Information about the work environment, so things that are, generally about shifts and seasonal changes, but in your local area, it actually might be information about, local downturn in the industry or upturn in the industry, or particular information that might help you understand drivers, okay, or other issues that might be affecting the training market. Certainly horizon sort of stuff, you know, that might lead you to even new niche training areas. Particular employer preferences about the way the program is delivered. Now, that's not to say that they're going to sit down with your training and assessment strategy and map it out for you, okay, and come to all of the, you know, decisions about electives, although they could have some input into that. But, you know, it could very well be that they might very well have some preferences for about, let's use the apprentices and trainee market, for example, you know, about block release versus day release, about timing of those things. You know, you can never get a refrigeration and air conditioning apprentice to any training during summer because that's their peak season, for example. But, you know, they would prefer to have, you know, perhaps very early morning or late afternoon rather than, you know, some other type of training delivery. Around the qualification structure, delivery and assessment, you might be able to get information, for example, this is where your industry skills councils come in. So if you've got particular issues around those particular areas, you may very well have contacted the Industry Skills Council, or if it's a regulated or licensed area, you may very well have contacted the licensing bodies around that, or similar groups, to get information, particularly when new qualifications come on board. And that sort of contact, that's industry engagement, because the Industry Skills Council represents industry as well. So that's a strategy that you've used. So don't discount Industry Skills Councils. It's not about getting them to come and, you know, give you feedback on your training and assessment strategy. It's around the strategy, okay, but it's questions that you've used to inform your strategy. As well, the Industry Skills Councils, unions, peak bodies, Productivity Commission, a whole range of bodies that are informed by industry, produce a whole lot of research, environmental scans, reports and submissions about industry training needs, about what's happening in, you know, the long and short term, medium and long term around the labour market. So does usually each jurisdiction's Department of, well, whatever it may be. It might be Department of Labour, might be Department of Training, might be Department of Education, if that's where training holds itself. But again, it's often informed by lots of industry input. Think about those things as useful in terms of labour market trends. Usually you can find your industry sector there. You can find information about labour shortage areas, often right down to almost qualification levels, and certainly job description levels. As well as that, talking to your local employers, no one better than to have a chinwag with Stephen about what young people, existing workers, mature age workers and any other labour segment, what they come to you with in terms of their skill set. Because Stephen or Bill or, you know, anybody else in employment will tell you, you know, oh, those young people, they can't read and write. You know, they don't come with enough of this and they don't come enough with that. And they need more of this. And when they come out of training, they don't know how to do this and they don't know how to do that. So it's not that they come out of your training organisation that way, but they will give you, I think, very freely of their opinion. And that is a range of strategies that you can use to populate your overall synopsis around your strategies, practices, and resources if you obviously ask the questions around those things. How do we do that? My advice is you do it in bite-sized pieces. And I know I'm running short of time. Because you can't just go out and say to industry, look, I need all this information about all of these things. And I'll just use some personal reflection here, really. I've covered some of these points in terms of what's on the horizon, etc. But essentially, my view is that if we want industry to collaborate with us, if we want industry to engage with us, we have to invite them on a level that they feel comfortable with. Some of the things that I've used in the past, I've invited industry to award ceremonies. A person in my local community with a no strings attached approach. Would you please come and present some awards in your industry to our recipients on awards night or on our graduation? It's about making that person feel comfortable coming into the training environment. Again, no strings attached, but making them feel special and making our graduates feel special because industry has presented the award. It's about making people feel comfortable in collaborating with you in making decisions. But if you do so, make sure it's a decision, bite size, that when the decision is made jointly, collaboratively, it's a decision you can live with. So don't ask them to make decisions about, your business and then say, oh, sorry, I don't like that decision, can't live with that. Make sure it's a decision you can live with. So bite-sized decisions, okay, but ask them to join with you in making decisions, but decisions you can live with. And then, of course, you have to stick to the decision. Invite them onto committees. But of course, again, this is an educative process. If you invite them onto a committee, make sure you structure the agenda of that committee and the time frame so that the person is there, valued for their time, and only there for the time and for the business that you've asked them, invited them there for. Don't waste their time. If they choose to stay longer, well and good. However, structure the time, the meeting, and their contribution. If not, ask for an appointment and go to their workplace. Ask 1 or 2 questions. Again, be specific. If you want information about duration or electives or methods of delivery, just make it specific and move on. I used to have a process where my workplace trainers used to ask 2 questions every visit they made. We had 2 questions for every quarter, and they went to every business, asked those same 2 questions. So at the end of a quarter, we would have a great compendium of information relating to those 2 questions. The next quarter, different questions. Next quarter, different questions. By the end of the year, we had a great amount of information that we could analyse and we could bring to our training and assessment strategies. We could collate it and we could say, okay, this is what employers think about method of delivery, block versus day release. This is what employers think about these particular issues of our online for theory. This is what employers think about, this sort of seasonal practice, etc. And particularly, if you're going to vary volume of learning or amount of training, you want a consistent message from employers. You want to have that evidence that suggests that there is if you like, a consistency or a swathe of, I suppose, support out there for your strategy. So the purpose and outcome, well, we want it to be systematically used. We want it to have impact on the training and assessment strategies and practices. So we want to be able to see that there has been this clear impact, particularly, as I said, where there's a volume of learning. How are we going to retain this evidence? Look, you probably already have very, very clear and meaningful ways of doing that. You might have a SMS or an LMS that does it. You might have a continuous improvement register that already does this for you. But knowing that we have to use these outcomes systematically, I'm just going to suggest to you that here is one way that you might very well do it. It's a simple record, shows the date, shows the name and the contact person, their details, shows what happened during that consultation, and then focuses in this column here on the 3 areas of the standard that are the requirements of the standard: training assessment strategy, resources, and the currency of current industry skills of trainers and assessors. The last column says, okay, well, how did that outcome, how do we use it, and where have we got the evidence? So it's just a simple tracking form. Now, you don't have to do it this way at all, just a sample of pulling it together into focus. And here is one way that you could very well have tracked a conversation. So we went to Joe's workshop. We talked to him about the end-to-end process for replacing tyres in the workshop. And out of that, we really started to talk about a range of other things. We got some confirmation about the workshop hours for the attendance of staff in training, because we're doing some workplace training for existing staff. We had a discussion about the appropriateness and the availability of the workplace for the assessor. We did some skills, I think that says, and competence. Oh, you talked about the skills and the competence of the trainer. So we covered off essentially the 3 main focus areas of the requirement of the standard. And in terms of how we've used that, helped us inform the delivery of and the assessment of this. Inform the order of delivery. It informed a decision about which units we can assess. We've tracked that into the particular into the training and assessment strategy. It's also helped us with the resources, and we had that conversation about the currency of the trainer and assessor. So all of those things have been able to be tracked in evidence as well. Again, how you do that, you already perhaps have mechanisms for doing it as well. And I'll just have a moment, I think, left. A moment for a question. I'm so sorry I've gone too long.
That's okay. We've got quite a few questions, but we can follow up on a lot of those afterwards. So I've just got 3 that we'll do. Validation and moderation with industry. If there are difficulties with literacy and the industry reps, would video or photos of the process with notations be acceptable evidence?
Validation and moderation.
With industry. So I'm assuming they mean industry consultation.
Okay. And would
video and photo evidence with some notations be acceptable?
So why would we want video? Is this to say that the engagement occurred?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of filling out a form.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How you do it is really up to you. Look, I have a client who, you can make a phone call. You don't necessarily need to go to video evidence. And an auditor really isn't, going to, require video evidence, I'm sure. It's just that we want to see that it's happened. We want to know that there is a trail of evidence. People I personally accept that people are honest about these things. So if you say that you went and saw Joe Bloggs and you've recorded it on a form like that, really, unless I have some reason to not believe you, I'm going to believe you. If you can supplement that with, for example, you might have some minutes of meetings that have recorded where that has been then taken up, perhaps to further discussion in meetings. You might have some emails where you've gone back to Joe and you said, thanks, Joe, for your meeting on the 16th of January, where we confirmed our workshop training program. I rather like that email trail, So, don't overthink it, okay? Don't go to the point where you create evidence that really the auditor's probably not going to have time to see, you know, e.g. they're not going to have time to sit down and watch a video. So if you want to, you know, go and have your meeting, no need to video it, but just follow up with a simple email that says, thanks so much for your meeting today. And, you know, hopefully then, you know, Joe, would you send us an email just to confirm the final details about Alex coming to train on Thursday? Bing, 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 you've got really proof positive.
That's your evidence straight back from them.
Yeah.
And we'll actually just have one more question. Is engagement with employers only enough for industry engagement?
Okay. It's probably not a range of strategies, it's a range of employers. It's probably not a range of strategies, no. I think you really need to probably think about some of those other things, or, you know, again, it will be contextually appropriate to your RTO, but it's probably not a range of strategies.
Yeah, so think about who those other people were that you described as who are industry.
Yeah, yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Thank you very much, Carol. So we've got lots of information about marketing and industry engagement in alignment with the new standards. Hopefully you've got your list of things that you need to go and have a look at.